Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are, whoever you might happen to be, and welcome once again to Anime Octane, the show in which we, the folks at Nerd Caliber, take a look at a recent piece of anime series or movie or something of the like, and we talk about it in depth, which means we're going to look at what we liked, what we didn't like, what worked, what didn't work. We'll get to themes, messages, tone of the whole thing, etc., which means we're going to spoil it. What we're going to spoil tonight is the last movie, the fourth movie in the Neon Genesis Evangelion Rebuild series. And in theory, the conclusion to the entire franchise.
Yes.
In theory. In Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time. So if you have not seen that... I'm sorry?
No, I think a better way to describe it is like an end to Anno's story at the very least. The story he wanted to tell.
Yes. Well, it's his baby, so nobody else is going to tell a story unless they give him a ton of money. So, if you have not seen this and you don't want it to be spoiled, then you should probably not be watching the show. If you have seen it or you don't mind spoilers, then feel free to hang in, chat with us, let us know what you think of this movie, of the franchise in general, our opinions on it, whatever's on your mind. We love to see people interact with us in the chat. I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber, first-person shooter, on Facebook as a cosplay photographer, which I finally got to do again this weekend at Fan Expo Boston. Yay! And Burley _adopter on Twitter and a couple other places, mostly as a cosplay journalist. Joining me tonight is kind of our resident weeb, our anime guy. Byron, introduce yourself.
Hi guys, Byron McNeil, aka Byron D0 on multiple facets of the internet, contributing writer for Nerd Caliber, and social media guy at conventions, which I also got to do again this weekend. Woo! That was exciting.
Our man on the Instagrams.
Yes. Yes. Always and forever. As long as I can hold a camera. Hold a phone anyway. I also do a little bit of art myself. If you like fan art of any kind, you should check out my artist Insta. It's BD0Art. That's BDZEROART on Instagram.
Excellent. Let's see, Millie Vasquez, welcome to the show if you're still here. Julia McKinney, hi, welcome to the show. Waifu Pennywise, welcome back. Good to see you back. Haven't seen you in a while. Let's see, we got anybody else in the other chatty type things? Not at the moment. All right, so what we do with these kind of shows, whether it's this or a full fat spoiler chat, is we start with describing, what this is and where it came from, and that's a tall order. So yes. I am going, very tall. So I'm going to kind of condense this to as tight and concise piece of information as I can, which means I am going to just completely skip over any nuance. You could go down rabbit holes for months on literally almost any individual part of this story.
I've written psych papers on this story.
There are college classes devoted to analyzing the meaning of the original Neon Genesis Evangelion anime series. So, Neon Genesis Evangelion is the name of an anime series that ran in 1995 into 1996. It was preceded by the manga adaptation of the script, but it is not based on a manga that existed previously. That was put out as promotional material. So technically the manga preceded it, but it wasn't based on a manga. The manga was based on the script of the series. It was hugely received. It was viewed initially as a mecha story, which it is. It's teenagers piloting giant robot things. And then when people started watching it, they discovered just how incredibly subversive it was. How Hideaki Anno was throwing deep philosophical messages at them, personal stories about trauma and depression, religious allegories, metaphysical stuff that, that metaphysical.
Pedophilia.
What's that?
Pedophilia.
Well, yeah, it's Japan. Um, so yeah, so let's not go down that rabbit hole. Although I'll just we can invite some discussion about that when we get into some of the things about likes and dislikes about this movie. So let's try to keep, like I said, rabbit holes forever. Let's try to keep it focused on this movie. The series was received incredibly well, except for the insanely confusing, bizarre. It's hard to describe the ending of that series. Incomprehensible, I think, is the best way to describe it. So pretty much immediately, they decided to put out 2 movies that was supposed to make it a little bit more clear what the ending was. They were Evangelion, Death and Rebirth, which released in 1997, March of 97, and then immediately after that, End of Evangelion, which was July of 1997. And basically what that is Death and Rebirth is essentially a clips compilation movie with a little bit of new footage, and then at the end of it is like 30 minutes from End of Evangelion, which then came out a few months later with that 30 minutes of footage plus the rest of a whole movie that sort of explained a few things that were really confusing about the ending of the series, but also maybe was a different ending, but maybe wasn't. So, as you can gather, it didn't clear a whole lot up. So, Anno and his studio that he owns, Studio Kara, decided that they were going to put out a series of 4 movies, a tetralogy, as you call it, that would retell the story in a way that would be more achievable by moviegoers who weren't huge fans of the franchise. And that they planned that out pretty early on, the early 2000s. It was in the works, and those movies did come out. They're numbered like 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and instead of 4.0, it's this movie, the 4th and final movie, 3.0 plus 1.0, or 3.0 plus 1.0.
I think part of that was because it was in development hell for so long.
Right. And there is that. Again, this is a rabbit hole. It took a long time for this 4th movie to come out. Anno was pretty much, according to his own statements, burned out on the whole concept of it at that point, and completely unclear on where he could go after the pretty terrible, I mean, not terrible as far as the story goes, but terrible to the characters ending of 3.0. And so he went off and he worked on some other stuff. He made Shin Godzilla, a live action movie, and that experience, we'll get into this later on, but that experience clearly influenced the structure and the look of this movie a lot.
Absolutely.
So we finally get up to the mid 2010s, like 2015, so they really started working on the idea of producing this. They finally got in around 2019. They started working on it, and then of course COVID hit when they were in the process of finishing up compositing of all the effects and so on, and voice work. Ultimately, it was supposed to be released in, I think, January or February of 2021. It hit Japanese cinemas March 2021, and internationally, it wound up on Amazon about 3.5 weeks ago. Mid-August here in the States and around the world. And so that's where we are now. What this movie tells the story of is the story of the main characters, Shinji Ikari, Asuka Langley, or Shinikami Langley.
Yep.
And Rei, I always forget how to pronounce her last name.
Ayanami.
Ayanami, thank you. As well as a few other characters. The newly introduced Mari Illustrious Minakami? What's her last name? What's Mari's last name? Mari Makinami. Got some vowels mixed up.
Yes.
Well, not really a new character because he's kind of actually introduced at the end of the anime series and end of Evangelion.
Kaoru Nagisa. So, Kaoru, right?
Kaoru Nagisa, yeah.
Yes.
So well, his story actually really wraps up in 3.0. Really wraps up.
Essentially, it does.
Yeah. But so essentially what it does is it continues their story from that point, and it starts off, Shinji is almost comatose. He is literally non-responsive. He is in such deep shock from watching Rei die, from watching Kaoru's head blow up right in front of him. Shinji's been through a lot.
Yes.
It opens with a wonderful. They get right into a battle sequence where, so the. Again, this takes so long to explain all this stuff, but Katsuragi, who was, I think, Major Katsuragi in the original series.
Yes, Masato.
Yes. And again, let me make sure I'm getting that out. Masato Katsuragi, yes. Has left NERV, the group that's run by Shinji's dad, and created an anti-NERV organization to fight against what Shinji's dad is trying to do, which is essentially, destroy the world. In his view, make it a better thing, but in the process, everybody dies. So this group, which, as it turns out, and I never could get the pronunciation correct, even though I was listening to it in the Japanese and reading subtitles. In English, it's spelled Wille, so Willy. And that just...
I forgot what it's pronounced, too.
So it's German. It's Wille. Which means virtuous or something like that. Or truthful, essentially. But anyway, this organization, which we're going to call Weirda, is fighting against NERV, and it starts off with this enormous battle where they are trying to free Paris from the effects of what they call the near third impact. Which they wonderfully call N3I. At a whole bunch of points, there are people who actually make an acronym out of that. In which essentially most of the entire world has been covered in. I don't know, how do they describe this? It's the field that creates the state of what Shinji's dad Gendo is trying to create. People inside this have essentially lost their individuality, or dead, and their souls have lost their individuality. So it's a wonderful battle scene. It involves Mari and her Unit 08.
And the Eiffel Tower.
And the Eiffel Tower. It's really cool, very well done. But then we get to see Shinji, not Rei, because at this point, the person that looks like Rei is just another clone. And if you watch the series and End of Evangelion, you'd realize that all of the Reis are essentially... Clone isn't the right word. Manufactured beings that are based on exactly the same template. Because they're not clones of actual real human beings. They are manufactured. And to some extent, we find out in this movie that all of the kids are.
I mean, in a sense, they are kind of... The Rei line were built off of Yu Yakari, but that's another rabbit hole.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, Rei is... Her template is from Shinji's mom, Gendo's dead wife, And then Asuka, the Shinigami line, they're all these are more likely clones. Rei is a completely manufactured entity made from the material that essentially builds the Evangelion units, the organic giant mecha things. Um, yeah, rabbit hole. Sorry, folks. Anyway, so the story tells, or the movie tells the story of where they go, how Shinji recovers from his deep, deep, terrible depression, and ultimately the final battle against Gendo and Nerve to stop him and fix this. Because at this point in the story, essentially the Earth is screwed. And most people on the Earth are screwed.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's basically where the story of this movie occurs, and it does bring everything to a resolution. In the teaser material we put out for this, I sort of jokingly said, does Evangelion make sense now? And before we get into any of the details, I want to hear your opinion on that, Byron. Do you think that they made this clearer, more easily understandable with this finale?
Well, I have a different I'm probably a different perspective on it from like a lot of people who are getting into who are just getting in, who've only experienced these movies. Like, this is this is going my own personal rabbit hole, trying to let it run too long, but I watched Ava at a point in my life where I did not have the emotional maturity to really appreciate what it was trying to say. And over the years, like over the past 1.5 decades, I've pondered on it and read on it and thought on it for so long, to the point where like watching this movie felt like a much better. If it gave me the same feeling that Brotherhood, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood did, where it's like I feel like both these movies and the series complement each other. It's by no means the exact same comparison, because the movies don't tell a clear story on their own either.
True. I think it is a more approachable resolution to the story than the end of the series or even the end of Evangelion movie. But it is still loaded with things that are way up for interpretation.
Oh, absolutely.
But having said that, it gives you an interpretation, and if you want to just look at the plot of this and say, okay, does this make sense? I think it does. I think they wrote a plot that you can just look at and say, okay, Shinji's story is finally resolved. The attack by the angels, Gendo's conspiracy, all of that is finally resolved.
Yes.
But if you want to look at a lot of other things that are going on that Anno leaves up for you to interpret, it's not as incomprehensible as the first series and the first movie, but it's certainly there for those people who want to just dig and dig and dig, and do. That was the only way you could understand or try to understand the first series, is dig, 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 and try to come up with an interpretation.
Oh, absolutely.
Here he gives you one, and then also, I think, gives you the tools where you can dig a lot deeper if you want.
Yes,
go ahead.
definitely it told Shinji's story much more succinctly than it did in the original series. I will
Right.
not take that away from it.
And just to be clear, this doesn't the first, well, two movies, I guess. The idea was that the first three movies would essentially just retell the original story, and they wouldn't get into any new story until the fourth movie. That didn't happen.
Mm-mm.
They started putting in new stuff even closer to the end of the second movie in this
Yes.
four-movie rebuild series. But so this does not tell Shinji's story. It tells essentially a different version of the end of Shinji's story from the end of the animated series, the last handful of episodes, plus the end of the movie, the end of Evangelion. Because there's a time skip that goes forward 14 years. The kids all look exactly the same because they're not technically normal humans. But at one point in the story, Shinji winds up in a village that has been cleared from this, red. There's a term for it. I can't remember what it is. The nature of the world where it's been almost destroyed by Gendo and Nerve.
Basically,
And
basically, I look at it as like a visual aid of the Human Instrumentality Project.
right, thank you. That's so. The end result of the Human Instrumentality Project, the world has been turned into this, just this red. Everything is red. Everyone is, almost everyone, except for those people who are fighting against Nerve, are dead, and their souls have essentially been united into one awareness. But anyway, this village is normal. All of that has been cleared in this one village outside of Tokyo 3. And there's a scene where the not Rei, because she has no idea what her name is supposed to be. She has not been taught or indoctrinated at all by Gendo or Nerve, so she is a clone with essentially no memories. But in this village are or not all of, are a bunch of Shinji's high school friends. I know he never had friends. High school acquaintances.
His classmates.
Classmates. There we go. His classmates, who have grown up the 14 years, and they are married, have kids. That's one of the kids in that scene. So there's this big time jump. So it's not exactly telling exactly the same story as the original series. It does veer off and tell a new story. So we get into now the sections of what we like, what worked, and what did they try to achieve and succeed. Byron, jump into the likes.
All right. Well, the animation I definitely like. That opening fight that you mentioned. Okay by me. I like that. I like the completion of Shinji's arc in this movie. Like
Yep.
Mother's Basement spelled it out pretty clearly about how the final encounter between Shinji and Gendo was not a brawl of some sort, but a conversation. And
Well, there were brawl elements, but ultimately, yeah, it became a conversation.
yes, and it was a conversation that was long overdue. Like the dynamic between Shinji and Gendo, it it speaks not only to me as a person, a lot of my own familiar relationships, where I feel like if we actually took time to talk and listen, we might actually find common ground. And there have been people in my family I've had those conversations with, and I understand them better. I understand them better, and they understand me a little bit better because of it. Um, I'll save that. I'll save the rest of that for when we go over themes as a whole.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm with you there. I think that the what we likes and what we dislikes on this part of the show is going to be shorter than any other thing. Not because we don't like stuff, but this is the series for sure, and everything in the franchise is way more about the messages and the themes than it is about the plot.
Oh, absolutely. But I liked Shinji's development a lot in this. It was, and I think again that speaks more to me as a viewer, I think, because I remember as like a 21-year-old hating Shinji and everything and everything I thought he stood for, having no real understanding of psychology as a whole, still like just taking humans at face value, not understanding myself, and to being where I'm at now, it's just like, oh, I get it now. Like, I went from like being one of the many people online who were just like, oh, suck it up. I was like, dude, it's all right. You're allowed to be this way. You're allowed to feel like this until you're ready. And that whole progression in this film felt so organic because he had that mindset throughout the entire anime series and throughout these movies.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Yep. I like how Asuka and Shinji's relationship was settled as well. Like they admitted that at one point they did like each other, but now they don't, and that's okay.
Yep. Yeah. Although to be fair, Asuka admitted that when she was alive, and Shinji admitted that to her after she was dead. So, now, granted, as far again, this is one of the weird things about the show. It probably really was her, but it was sort of a recreation of her in the anti-universe, based on the LCL fluid stuff. That anyway,
The marmalade.
Yeah, the marmalade. But yeah, yeah. So even then, Shinji is still a little behind the curve on growing up.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna leave my thoughts there and save the meat and potatoes for the theme discussion.
Okay. So I'm agreeing with you 100% on the animation. The image that I had up before, this is during that big fight. This is Unit 08. And by the way, one of the really cool things about this is that at the beginning of the series, and mostly through it until you get to the very, very end, all of the units are damaged and have been modified with more traditional weaponry.
Yes.
Yeah,
they look more patchwork. They are more patchwork.
They are patchworks, and Eva's 01, Shinji's unit, is just a torso with a head, and isn't allowed, and he's not allowed to go anywhere near it by the people in Vire. So yeah, I think that's really cool. It also adds another dimension to the combat and the feel, to some extent, the realism of the combat, as wild and wacky as this stuff really is. There
were points in the combat that felt like a miniature version of the final battle of Gurren Lagann for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's some, and that's common throughout all of Evangelion as an anime series, that the fights scale up to the point of cosmic weirdness. This is this could be a couple of Celestials battling it out if this was the MCU. But I love that animation. I love the fact that, and I know there are a lot of people who don't like this, the fact that they didn't go strictly just 2D drawing animation. There is motion capture involved here. There's CG blended with 2D. There is straight up, full CG stuff. All of it's done beautifully. Most of it blends together really well. The one time that sort of for a second threw me out of the whole thing was When near the end, when Shinji is back in a fully reassembled, regrown 01, and his dad Gendo is in Unit 13, which are essentially identical. Um, they are fighting in the anti-universe and the LCL, the fluid that sort of makes up all of this stuff that creates all of, creates Rei, creates the Evas, has created a space for them to have combat in. And as it turns out, when you first look at it, you think they're in a city, a small city, and then the buildings, when they hit them, they start sliding around. And as the viewpoint pulls out, you realize that they're essentially in a soundstage. Because at one point, Shinji comes slamming right up against the edge of the soundstage wall. And that's just Anno doing, the weird shit that he likes to do and taking from his own experience, probably working on the live action Shin Godzilla.
I was going to make that point as well. Like, it felt like it took the idea of the final 2 episodes of them being on stage and flesh it out to its fullest capacity, I feel like.
Right. I mean, they are the two that are on stage metaphorically, and in this case, they are on a soundstage literally. And that could be a very meta commentary on, you've got giant kaiju destroying buildings, which is exactly what he did for Shin Godzilla. It could be that as well. It's like I said, there's so many layers of Hideaki Anno psychology in everything he does. I like the fact that they made it make sense without necessarily making it less deep and complex. And I think a lot of people thought that couldn't be done. I really think there are people out there who are probably not happy with this, and it's been insanely well received. But there are probably people out there who are not happy with this because you can now understand the plot line. And that means all of that work that they put in to try to analyze the insane ending of the original series, or even the end of Evangelion movie, was wasted. Folks, it wasn't wasted. This is still just as up for interpretation as the previous. It's just now the actual plot line and resolution isn't.
God, I can
go ahead.
I can just imagine all the Ava scholars coming out of their woodwork.
Yeah.
Like in their little hikikomori caves, just saying like, actually, this totally undermines the philosophies that were implemented into the original Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Except it doesn't in any way. If anything, it nails them even harder home. But again, we'll get into that because that's, like I said, this is so, this is so much about message and theme and tone. Escribania Cuarta, I don't know what that means, so I'm sorry, but welcome to the show. Other things I really like about it, of course, the voice cast, which is the original voice cast, and it's fantastic in Japanese anyway.
Also, well, they got a good chunk of the dub voice cast as well. Actually,
good.
I know that Allison Keith, Spike Spencer, Amanda Winley, and Tiffany. I'm blanking on her name. Great voice actress. But the original voice actress Asuka, Tiffany Grant, all reprised their roles for these films.
Awesome. And so we're talking about the actors. The voice actors are back, and they're all quite good, of course. The music. So the opening theme, particularly of Evangelion, is at this point just iconic. And while the incidental music through this is actually really good, the opening and closing themes are pretty bog standard anime.
Uh, I mean, it's the end theme was by Hikaru Utada, who you can't really. I'm never not in the mood to listen to her sing.
It's good. It's not epic, like instantly recognizable. Everyone will know this forever. Kind of good.
Well, yeah, it's
Um,
not her best, definitely not.
yeah. And other things about it. Again, like I said, I like the fact that this plot has resolution, understandable resolution, while allowing you to, you know, go wild, analyzing all sorts of stuff around it. Um, all right. So, having said that, dislikes. Do we have any? Oh, you know what? I'm actually going to bridge this with one of my likes that is also one of my dislikes. Um, and so then, but I'm not going to go into my dislikes. We'll go to yours first. But um, boy, is this thing loaded with excellent fan service.
Yeah.
And I brought up the image of, you know, the first time Asuka and Mari try on the new plug suits. Um, and that's a dislike for me as well, because it's just so
Dated.
well. I mean, there are still plenty of series that have fan service, but just the way, the direction, you know, there's an awful lot of male gaze butt shots in here, and
Yes.
you know, obviously I don't dislike that, but I also really understand that it's like, really? I mean, yeah, I get it. Your characters are in suits that are essentially sprayed on them. Um, but you know, that's anyway. So Byron, dislikes. What didn't work for you?
Um, that was one. I'd say that I'm gonna touch on the point about the songs.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, like I did. While I didn't hate them, I'm not going to be adding them to my YouTube music playlist anytime soon. They were just they were fine. Like I
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah, you know, Cruel Angel Thesis will always be the only intro to anything Ava for me ever.
Yep.
And Fly Me to the Moon will be the only ending that I will ever acknowledge for Ava ever. And that's really that with those two things.
Mm-hmm.
These two aren't going to change my mind.
Yeah.
Uh,
I understand.
yep. Um, there were individual characters that I didn't care for. Um, Toji's sister, who is part of the anti-nerve group, and how she committed to that whole obnoxious doting mother role.
Yep.
And I'm just like, girl, I mean, Sakura, chill, we get it. But oh yeah, and pink hair girl whose name I'm forgetting, who was just as bad. Like they were both ready to shoot Shinji to keep from getting to the Ava, and I'm just thinking like, do you have an alternative?
You know, I'm not really sure which one this is. Midori?
I believe so.
Yeah. I think. Um, yeah, so I can see that. So anything else on the dislike list?
Uh, I would have liked to have seen. I would have liked to seen Risco's character do a little bit more. Like she's such a focal point in the series, and I would have at least liked to have seen her play as big a part in the final conflict as Masato did.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Devlin Hollis. Welcome to the show. Hello. Why do you not have a lot of people? Why do we not have a lot of people on the show tonight? Well, you know, it's early September and lots of things are going on. But also, we will not generally. We will never have more than 4. just because it doesn't lay out on the screen very well.
Mm.
We generally top out at 3 these days. And I subbed to you ages ago. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I agree with you about that. I think her character does a few important things in this movie, but yes, she is way more important to the overall storyline than the role that she gets to play in this particular movie. I like what they did with her character, giving her the short hair, bad bitch, if you'll pardon the expression, look. But yeah, I can see that.
At least they didn't make her the jilted lover of Gendo again.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So my dislikes. So I'm not so much down on the nature of the two characters that ultimately wind up trying to stop Shinji from getting into EVA 01. But I can see that. I understand it. They were, at that point, well, certainly, if it is Midori, the pink-haired girl, she was a one-note character.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it.
It felt like she was trying to fill in for the resident tsundere role that Asuka had been filling in for the longest time.
Right. And Asuka certainly gets a buttload of her own tsundere moments in this thing as well, particularly while Shinji is trying to recover, from the deep, deep depression he's in, and she does not give him an inch of compassion or sympathy, as she wouldn't. That's not her character.
Nope.
So, the only things that I can say I didn't like, other than, again, the fact that the music was not epic in the sense that the music from the original series was. Although, the incidental music throughout the course of the movie is pretty good.
Of course.
I thought that Shinji's growth into a more adult who is more willing to at least try to understand his dad was a little fast. And now I say that knowing that this essentially has been building over 4 movies. So I guess you can't call it fast, but in this movie, if you take it as a standalone, he goes from nearly comatose, uncommunicative, depressed, kid to pretty aware, willing to connect to other people, already starting to develop a sort of teasing relationship with Mari, young man, in the space of, it's a 2.5-hour movie, so about 2 hours. But Gendo's turn is the one that was just too fast for me. I like that it happened. I like that it provided closure to the story of Gendo and Yui. But, so you can see here, Gendo isn't even really human at this point. And he pretty quickly sort of turns from, oh my God, I'm so sorry, or from, we've got to do this, so humanity will have a better, future in this post-human, world, the human instrumentality project that we're doing, to, I'm really sorry, Shinji, I was pretty shitty and it's all because I was missing your mom. Which is true. His realization of that came a little fast for me. And that's like the only thing I don't like about this. I'm kind of bummed about the number of characters who do not make it out of this, but it's not that I don't like that. That's frankly good storytelling. And just because I really wish this person was still alive or that person. Well, it's a spoiler show, so we don't have to worry about that. But if there's a harem aspect to any of this with Rei and Asuka and Mari, and even Kaworu
Masato.
and Masato, yeah, they don't get into that at all in this, and I'm fine. I'm glad they don't.
Yeah.
That troublesome aspect of the original series and end of Evangelion, where an adult teacher, has intimate relations with a teenage boy. That's not in this at all. Did it happen in their continuity? Yes. Is it addressed in this at all? No. And I guess in that sense, maybe it does make sense that Masato sacrifices herself to save Shinji and the world. That's kind of the resolution of that. Oops, we screwed up and told this story that involves pedophilia. So we're going to let the pedophile die in an act of sacrifice. But then to have Asuka and Rei both die, it is it's sad. So it's almost like Mari wins by default. If you can view this as a harem anime, and there are certainly aspects of that. It's not like any harem you would ever want to see
or be a part of.
Pardon me, or be a part of. Shinji is not a good guy in a lot of cases in his interactions with the young women in his life.
Sex. I was going to say the opposite sex.
Well, the opposite sex in any case. But I also included Kaworu in this because one of the nice things about this, I forgot to put this in my likes, is that they don't gloss over the implied, they don't go right out and say it, but the homoerotic relationship between Kaworu and Shinji.
I feel like that was a middle finger to Netflix, actually, honestly.
It might have been. In which Netflix changed some of the language in Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion, when it hit Netflix a couple of years ago, where Kaworu was clearly saying how he was attracted to Shinji, and I can't remember what they changed it to, but it's something.
You said I like you.
Yeah, much more brotherly. There's no question here. Kaworu straight up says, well, again, dead Kaworu in the anti-universe recreated by this LCL anyway, tells Shinji that that is one of some aspect of him, that's one of the reasons why I was so attracted to you. And there's no cringe, there's no Shinji accepts it, and he clearly had deep feelings for Kaworu, and Kaworu's death was what put him in that comatose level depression.
Yep.
And so let's jump back. That is one of the things I really like about this movie, is that they make that clear. So that's it. Likes, dislikes. Let's get into the big meat here. Themes and messages.
Sorry,
because we've already gone way too long on just talking about likes and dislikes, even though I said it was going to be short. So Byron, hit me up.
Well, there are just so many themes. I don't know if there's enough time.
It probably isn't, but just go right ahead.
All right. Big theme for me. Journeys. I think of it. I think of Evangelion as a whole as just becoming just the human, the journey of the human experience. Like, you go through, no one comes into this life prepared. And even when you think you are ready for something, life will always come at you with challenges of some sorts.
Yep.
And each and every character in this narrative represents a different aspect of the human experience. You have Gendo, who is the world-weary misanthrope, which I feel speaks to a lot of people, and at certain times in my life, he spoke to me. You have Masato, who who compensates for her who compensates for her trauma by trying to suck the marrow out of life in order to fill a void. You have characters like Asuka who
Yeah.
they put up all kinds of walls just to make themselves look strong so that no one can hurt them. And then there's Shinji. Shinji is the everyman. And
God, I hope not. God, I hope not.
I say that now that his story is complete. If you had asked me that when this started, I may not have been so sure of that, but Shinji's journey is very much relatable. I feel like if you really put it under a microscope, you can find you can find a lot of Shinji's journey relatable. Like, not in the sense that like how fucked up he is, but like the fact that you're going to go through hardships, you're going to lose things, you're going to be lied to, you're going to be abandoned,
Yeah.
you're going to get stepped on. But there's always a chance for things to get better.
Yeah. So, on that one point, let me just say, I don't think that this is a commentary on the general human condition that happens to. I think it's a commentary on what particular people who are dealing with very difficult trauma experience when, yes, the things that happen to everybody happen to them. In this case, even more, I mean, it's an anime, so it's, dramatic as hell, and, it's the end of the world kind of stuff. So in that case, I don't think you can really call him the everyman, except that maybe at some point every person deals with, depression in their life. And,
Yes.
In that case, this is how an accurate depiction of how they might deal with it in a hyper melodramatic fashion.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
And and it's a much more believable depiction of depression because it's unlike other stories where like they become a more positive, upbeat version of themselves. Shinji, like, while Shinji comes to his senses, he hasn't forgotten what got him there.
Yep.
And you see that in the conversation that he has with Gendo, which I think, well, while you said it might have been too fast, I feel like I'm willing to give that wiggle room because they're family. Like, they may not have loved each other, but they understood each other.
Yep.
So that was kind of that had to have been what made him realize. Made him realize that the conversation needed to be had.
Yeah. I can see that. I still think it's just a little bit too quick a turn from heel to redeemed villain.
Fair enough. I don't think, and that's the thing, I don't think Gendo was really redeemed.
Well, he sacrifices his own life so Shinji doesn't have to create the quote Neon Genesis, the new world.
Yes, I will say, yeah. I would have said he would have been. I would have been more. I would have thought he was more redeemed if he had survived, if he had been reborn into this new world as a different person.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So he realized that. Yes, like he, in a sense, I could see that a sacrifice being redemption, but it was more like, this is how I pay for my sins.
Yeah. Which is, in one case, redemption. So I think all of those are true. I think the through line for the whole series is ultimately about coming to if not love yourself, at least accept yourself.
Yes.
And ultimately, that even becomes Gendo's story, in which he has to accept the version of himself that lost his wife. And once he does that, he understands what he did to Shinji, and he feels that remorse, and is at a point where he is capable of making that sacrifice for his son, so that his son doesn't have to die, who was absolutely willing to die to create this new world. So I think that is really the main story, and I think that is sort of Anno's overriding take or overarching take on one of the most important things that has to happen for people to deal with depression. Is that first you have to accept that you're depressed, and then you have to accept that it's okay for you to be depressed, and then you have to accept yourself that's worthy of being growing past that depression. Whether you're seeking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's where all those conversations really hit home for me. Like, yeah. Especially between Shinji and Asuka.
Yes.
Because like there are a lot of people that will seek out certain partners because they think that they're going to complete them or they're going to make them better or whatnot, and that's what I feel Shinji and Asuka represent. Like their dynamics, like that person that you think is going to complete you.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and I also think that's as important, if not more important, a realization on certainly Shinji's part, but both of their parts, Shinji and Asuka, than it is for Shinji to realize that he really needs to talk to his dad and try to understand his dad, and maybe then his dad will understand him. Now, ultimately, it's the father-son relationship that saves the world. But I think it's the Shinji-Asuka relationship that gets Shinji to the point where he can do that with Gendo. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important. And also Rei and also Kaoru, to some extent, and Kaoru probably to an even greater extent than Rei. But you're right, it is Asuka and Shinji's final resolution of their relationship and what it could have been, but really shouldn't have been, that drives him to the place where he can deal with Gendo and try to help Gendo, basically. I think that if there's anything that nails home that this is also the story ultimately of Anno's depression, and that's been said a lot, and Anno has talked about being depressed at times around the making of the series and so on, but he also leaves up whether or not this is sort of his story about depression to the reader. The series or the movie ends with yet another time skip after the world has been essentially recreated. This new world has been reborn by the actions of, Shinji, but primarily Gendo and Yui. And we see a train station in a small city, and where there's some people sitting on the platform. One of them is a guy in a suit, and it turns out it's I don't know how much older, but an adult Shinji, and with him is an adult Mari, and they clearly have some kind of relationship. How committed or deep it is, who knows, but it is at least at the level of very convivial flirting.
Yes.
And then as the train stops and they get on, or Shinji gets on, I guess they both get on, and it's a single car train and it moves along the trolley. The camera pulls back, and it is clearly a very accurately detailed CG representation of a real place. I mean, it almost looks like live action footage, except you can just tell that it's been recreated entirely.
I feel like that was a nod to End of Evangelion.
In what way?
The very end, where it was just like a shot of like a crowd in Japan.
Oh, yes, good point. I actually forgot about that. Except in this case, and I had no idea because I don't know enough, and I'm not one of those EVA analysts like you were talking about. But the EVA analysts out there said that's Ano-san's actual home city where he grew up.
Oh wow.
So he ends it with Shinji, a now healed, living a real life Shinji in Ano's own hometown. And if that doesn't tell you that this is about Ano's journey through depression, the entire Evangelion franchise, at one level, is about that. At another level, it's about religious, metaphysical, sure. And the fact that when at one point Kaoru is actually having a conversation with the dead Kaji.
Oh, yes.
About the fact that there's a whole circle of Kaoru coffins or clone tubes or whatever yet to be opened. And this is a cyclical thing. And it's in there. It's a statement. It's actually part of the story. And you want to, put in meat there for the EVA analysts to chew on for another couple of decades. That alone, it's like, wait a minute, is this like the Matrix? It's this is and in this case, it seems like this is version 3. Because I think there are only 3 other opened, or maybe version 4, because only 3 other opened tubes or coffins or whatever on the other side of Kaoru. But yeah, so there's all of that. You can think of whatever you want the story to be. It can really be about that, but I think it's really clear now that this is about Ano's depression, about dealing with depression, and about ultimately getting better and growing past it. And that's 9:02, folks. We've got enough, few minutes. Byron, recommendation, yes or no, and scale of 1 to 10, where do you put it?
Well, I definitely recommend it, especially if you if you're someone who watched the original series and are curious. I would give it an 8 out of 10.
All right, I agree with that. I would give it a recommendation as well if you are familiar with the series, but I would put a caveat on that. It really makes a lot more sense if you've watched the previous 3 movies, because they do veer off into brand new storyline, or brand new interpretation of the storyline, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it still ultimately is about Nerve and Gendo trying to create this human instrumentality project. Or bring it about. But even still, if you haven't, but you're familiar with the original series, you'll get it. You're not going to be lost. Put it that way. They don't go out of their way to do any sort of exposition, but it's internally within the story. It actually comes up pretty quickly. And I'm pretty much right with you too. 8 out of 10. Maybe 9 out of 10. I might modify this as I ponder it a little bit more. But I'd say a solid 8 out of 10. With the only few problems I had being essentially what I think are character developments that happen mainly for convenience. That's not the right way. They were destined to happen, that happen the way they happen or as quickly as they happen, mainly for convenience. But having said that, that's it, folks. That is our show. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the comments, those of you that did comment in the chats. Tomorrow night, Nerd Week Live. We've got a lot of stuff, but we're just going to put this out there. Michael Kenneth Williams died earlier today. He's not known for a ton of nerd stuff, but he's known for a ton of brilliant work, and the one big piece of nerd stuff he did recently, Lovecraft Country, is genius level.
Yeah.
So we will be doing a remembrance of him, as well as some other big stories that have dropped in the past week. And our full fat spoiler chat this Thursday is going to be the Hugh Jackman movie Remembrance. this has absolutely nothing to do with it, but since we're talking about passings, apparently today Hugh Jackman's father died. So, yeah, pretty crappy day.
Yeah.
And then next week is No Nerd Caliber instead of Anime Octane. That's we skip those every 2 weeks. No Nerd Caliber for next week is, he says, filling in with chatter as he waits for the page to load, which he should have had up already. Oh, yes. Top 3... that timing isn't right. September 9. All right, hold on. So it looks like we're missing something. I can't tell you what September 9 Full Fat Spoiler Chat is right now because I don't see it. So anyway, there will be something. It'll be good and interesting. I guarantee it. Yeah, somebody... anyway, but internal stuff. Don't have to worry about that. We will have something for Full Fat Spoiler Chat this Thursday, and it will be a lot of fun. I guarantee it. So, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. If you get a chance, do please take a quick trip over to Patreon. Check out our page at patreon.com/nerdcaliber. Love to have you help us support us. Just a couple of tiers, and they're both pretty low dollar. They're really there just so that you can support us getting out to more cons now that, we're getting to cons again. We had MegaCon a couple of weeks ago. We're now Fan Expo Boston just this last week, and Dragon Con. BentPick 5's galleries are already starting to go up. We want to get to more cons, folks, and get you more content on both YouTube and the website and so on. So
that's right.
Exactly. So, having said that, that's it for the show. Byron, give us a goodbye.
Alright, this is Byron D0 telling you to check out my content on the interwebs. I have a YouTube channel which I should be updating as soon as humanly possible. It's Byron D0, BYRONDZERO. Have a good night, y'all.
Cool. And Rodney Brown, for the rest of us at Nerd Caliber, thank you very much. And we'll see you at an upcoming show. Please stay safe, folks. Wear your masks when you go out to any of these big venues. There are already reports of people at Dragon Con who had COVID while they were there. And so there are going to be reports, a lot of them coming out of Dragon Con, of people getting infections. And the new Mu variant is in 49 states now. So, folks, stay safe. Wear a mask if you're in any kind of a crowd.